Hello and welcome along to this tutorial on how to use Camunda's REST API and basically discover the kinds of powerful things you can actually do with that REST API. My name is Niall Deehan. I'm an international consultant with Camunda, and in this picture is also featured a hawk named Flint Ironstag. This tutorial is going to take place by simply beginning by creating a process, obviously getting a REST client, which we'll need, deploying a process to the engine via REST, and then doing things that we normally would expect we can do, like starting a process via REST and finding and completing tasks. Okay, so let's get started. Alrighty, so now it's time for us to build our model. If you followed some previous tutorials, you probably already have the Camunda modeler. If not, just go to camunda.org/downloads, or you can just use Google and find the Camunda modeler and download it. Once you do download it and start it up, you'll see something like this, in which we can start a new BPMN, DMN, or CMN model. So we're going to create a BPMN one, and we begin with a start event. So following this is the beginning of our process. We're going to add a task. This task is going to be a user task because we want some sort of user to do this. And it's going to be pick a team. Following this, we'll have an XOR gateway. Okay, and this is going to be a question. What team did you pick? We'll go up here if the answer is Preußen Münster. If not, we'll go and end the process. This task is going to be another user task, and it's going to be watch game with Niall. Great. Okay, so that's just, and then this is going to be our default. Okay, so now we have a really simple process. We're going to need to add now the execution semantics to make this thing run. The first thing I'm going to add is I'm going to select this gateway here and the sequence flow leaving this gateway, and I'm going to select a condition, which is an expression, and the expression is going to read hash open bracket curly bracket, and it's going to be team name, and if that equals Preußen Münster, then we'll go this way, and for any other team we'll just leave Niall alone and we won't go and bother him with anything. Okay, so we now need the final thing to do is to give this process a name and an ID. So this is going to be let's say watch Münster process. Okay, and we're ready to deploy this now. This process is ready to roll. So I'm going to save this just to my desktop. Great. And now we need to take that file and we're going to actually deploy that. But of course, first, we're going to need a REST client of some kind. If you don't already have a REST client that you'd like to use, I'm going to go through the basic idea of how to get Postman, which is a REST client I use quite a lot. We're going to start by going to Chrome, my browser. I'm going to do a search for get Postman. Okay, we have here getpostman.com, so we'll go right there. And then we will have a section of downloads. Depending on what system you're using, download the corresponding guy there. I'm using a Windows 64-bit system, so I'll get that. Okay, so downloading should start in a few seconds. Okay, and now Postman is downloaded. So now I'm going to go to the folder which I have this downloaded and double click and start it up. Okay, so you don't have to create an account. You can just click there to create an account another time, and then you arrive here at this lovely setting. So at this point now we have the ability to send REST calls. If you haven't already, you should start up the Camunda server in the background, and that again is, if you followed previous tutorials, that's done by going to the startcamunda.bat or startcamunda.sh, depending on what system you're using.
And that should then start up the server. And then we can start making communication to it. And as I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try and deploy our process to the Camunda engine. If you want to make a REST call to Camunda, there's a very obvious place to start, and that is with the docs page, because we have all of our REST calls well documented there. So let's go back to our web browser. Let's select a new tab and let's enter docs.camunda.org. Okay, to bring us to all the documentation. Next, we are going to go to the reference right here on the left. And once there, you'll see there's a REST API section. So select that. What that shows you is a list of high-level topics for our REST calls we want to make. We are going to be using, we want to create a new process definition. We want to deploy our process to Camunda. So we should go to deployment. And you can see the list of REST calls here. We have for querying deployments, redeploying, but we also want to, of course, create. So let's go there. So first of all, we have every REST call in Camunda is going to have the same pattern. It's going to have the method itself. It's going to have details about the parameters that you can add to this REST call. It's going to have the result you should expect. And it's going to have response codes and what they mean. A very important thing it's going to have as well is it's going to have a example for you to use. So in this case, we're going to use the post deployment create call. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to Postman. I'm going to select in Postman, select the type post. I'm going to need to add in the REST endpoint for the engine. That is localhost 8080, which is the server /engine-rest. And I'm going to add to that deployment and create. Okay. So the next thing to do is I need to go to the headers and add content type. And it is going to be a multi-part form data because we're going to be sending a file. Okay. Next up, we're going to go to the body section. And here we're just going to add upload. It's of type file. And now I'm just going to choose the file we're going to get, which is going to be in desktop, which is Munster. Okay, so now if I click send here, we should have our call as a post. The localhost 8080 engine rest is our endpoint, and the specific call we're making is deployment/create. We have our headers set, and we have a body set. So if I click send, okay, this should return with some details about how that REST call went. We can see here that we're given a link to it. So the deployment was successful. It has an ID. It also has some other bits and pieces saying that it's got an ID of Watch Munster is the key of our process and other bits and pieces. So now let's actually go and view this process in Camunda. Now, as I said, Camunda needs to be running, of course, for this REST call to even be successful. So we can assume that we can go to a web browser. And if it hasn't already loaded the welcome page, we can go to a new tab, type in localhost 8080/Camunda, and that'll bring us to task list. If it asks for a username and password, just enter demo. I'm going to go to cockpit, so I'm going to say I'm going to select the little house in the top right, select cockpit. And that'll bring us to the admin view of what's going on in the engine. So this shows what's currently running in the engine. And if we click on processes up here, we'll be able to see the 3 processes we have deployed, including Watch Munster. So if I click there, we should see that here is our process ready to go. Okay. So now that we have this nice visualization on what's going on with our process, it's time to and we have it actually deployed. It's now available to be started. And again, we can start this from a REST API. So to do that, I'm going to go back to our documentation. So if you have a tab open there for the documentation, swing back to it. Otherwise, it's docs.camunda.org, and follow the links to the REST API here. And we're going to go down to the process definition section. If I select that, it should again show the list of high-level calls we can make. And if we want to pick the specific one, in this case, we want to start instance. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to again scroll down until I find the example, which is somewhere near the bottom, or I can click here on the right. Okay, great. Okay. So this is their post call. There's two calls for starting a process. You can start by just by ID of the process, which we're not going to do. I'll talk more about that a little later on. Instead, we're going to start by key. So this will start the latest version of the process with a specific key associated with it. In our case, our key is called watch Munster. Okay. So again, I'm going to copy this. Going to go back to Postman, and I'm going to open a new tab in Postman by clicking the plus here. Okay, so as we saw, this is another post call. It's again going to use localhost 8080 /engine-rest. The difference here is that we're going to, after that, we're going to add process definition key, and we replace a process definition key with the actual key of our process, which is corresponding to the ID that we gave our process when we created it. In our case, as I said, is watch Munster. So if I add that, we now have the REST call of post localhost 8080 engine rest process definition /key, and that's really important, watch Munster, and then start. Okay, just like before, we need to add a header, but this time the content type is going to be different. The content type is going to be application JSON. You can see from the docs, if we go back to the docs very briefly, that we can start this with variables if we like. I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to go to the body and just add, click on body, click on raw, and just add an empty JSON. Okay, so that's what we have. We've added our headers, which is content type application JSON. We've gone to the raw section of this and added an empty JSON to curly brackets, and we also have our endpoint. So let's start our process. Okay, there we go. That looks good. So it looks like it started an instance. We can actually go back to Cockpit now. So if I go back to my tab here, we can see that if by refreshing this page, okay, we now have a single instance that has been started, and it is waiting at pick a team to do that. Okay, so that's it started. We can now start our process via REST. And now the next stage is we want to find this task via REST. We want to complete it with a variable that's going to either have, which is going to have the name of our team that we pick. Okay, so that's next on the list. It should come as no surprise that at this point I'm going to go back to the docs again, and I'm going to this time look for the task section, which is right here. Okay, and the thing we're going to do now is actually try and find the specific task for our process definition that we're looking for. And we can see here that get list is a good start. So if I click on that, we should be brought to this. So it's a really simple call. It's a get. It's /task. But of course, the important part here is all of the possible query parameters. So we're going to be asking the engine for a specific task that matches the parameters we're looking for. If I scroll down, I'll eventually come to the end of the query parameters and all the way down to an example, which is here. And this shows an example of get a task where the assignee equals whatever, and the some state is resolved and some priority is whatever it is that is. In our case, I'm going to be looking for a task for our specific definition. If I go back to Postman now, I'm going to open up a new tab in Postman, This is going to be another GET request. It's going to go to the local host 8080 like the rest, engine rest, and then it's going to be task. So if I just sent this call as it is now, just /task, it will return all tasks that are in the engine right now. So there's a bunch of those, and a lot of them I don't really need. So I'm going to need to add some parameters here. I'm going to say question mark. We can go back to the docs for a moment, and we can see here that one of the query parameters is we have definition key. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to add definition key. I'm going to have a question mark after my task, definition key equals, and again, the definition key is going to be the ID we gave the process initially. Okay, which is that one there. If I send this call, we should then return with a single result, which in this case is the task pick a team. Here's the ID of that task and other information that might be relevant to it. So now that we have our ID of this task, it's time to complete it. So I'm going to grab this ID. I'm going to actually you know what, leave it there for now. I'm going to go back to the docs, and I'm going to go back to task. And this time we want to actually complete a task. So if I scroll down, we should see under the task section there is a complete task section, and this is a post call. It's got a /task, the ID of the task we want to complete, and then simply complete. Now this task we need to actually complete with data, because if we look back at the definition here, we see that this task needs to be completed, and depending on what data exists, we're either going to watch the game with Niall or we're going to end the process. So let's scroll down to the example section, or I can click on the right here and see that if here is the JSON example here of variables that we can send. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that. Okay, and I'm going to return to Postman. So now I'm going to change this. I'm going to add open a new tab, and I'm going to say post. And this is going to be again localhost engine rest task. It's going to have a header of a content type application JSON. Okay, in the body I'm going to select raw again, and I'm going to just paste the example stuff I have. Now these are just examples. What we actually need to do is I'm going to remove these two variables that we don't need and the corresponding comma, and the variable we need is, if we take a look at our model again, the variable we need is going to be called team name. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to say the variable we're passing to this is going to be team name, and the value of that is going to be, of course, the best football team in the 3rd division of the German Football League, which is Preußen Münster. Okay. So now we can now we just need the ID of the task to complete, and we're done. So the variable we're sending is team name with the value of Preußen Münster, and we need to go back here and grab this ID from our task. Okay, so this is the specific task we want to complete. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my tab where I have my post call, and after task I'm going to add / the ID / complete, and then click send. Alrighty, and we got no content back, which is actually exactly what I would expect. And if I return back to my web browser and go back to Cockpit, okay, this is the task that we saw before. If I refresh this, I would expect that the process has moved on to watch game with Niall. So let's refresh this. Okay, what a great success that was. Okay. Of course, loads more fun to be had with the REST API. You can do all sorts of interesting and fun things. And of course, this should have hopefully explained that a good place to start with anything you want to do would be the docs page. Hopefully that'll give you enough to get started, and hopefully you'll join me next time for the next tutorial, which could be on even more fun advanced stuff. Bye bye.